What is going on, gecko guys and gals? Today, I just wanted to do a review on America's next top morph, the Black Knight Leopard Gecko. Selling in the billions each year, Rainbow Mealworms is your one-stop shop for all your insect needs. Their quality feeders and A+ customer service keep me coming back to support the health and growth of all of our animals. Visit them today at rainbowmealworms.net to place your order. So let's go over a little bit of history of what the Black Knight Leopard Gecko actually is. It is a line bred trait, and so if you don't know the difference between line breeding traits and Mendelian traits, please take a look in the top right corner here of the video and feel free to check out my two-part series on line breeding specifically. I also have 4 videos on Mendelian breeding. The beautiful thing about leopard geckos is that they contain both. Now, some people in the ball python market are starting to do some line breeding with Mendelian breeding, but in leopard geckos, it's so common for line breeding and Mendelian breeding to go hand in hand. So please touch up on that video if you have no clue what I'm talking about right now. Essentially, line breeding is when you take similar traits in 2 different animals, mom and dad, and you line breed or you breed them together to heighten that trait. This can be likened in humans to taking a tall human being and breeding them with another tall human being to create even taller babies. And it's the same with the Black Knight. Over the course of the last 12 to 14 years or so, breeders from the Netherlands, the Asian continents, they really hit the Black Knight project hard. And they were just breeding the blackest geckos to the blackest geckos to the blackest geckos to the blackest geckos until you have what we have today in the hobby. Now I'm gonna show you some different examples. I kind of like when you can see a little bit of the underneath pattern and stuff, but I also really like the pitch black pure black leopard gecko. Now, any leopard gecko is typically going to lose color over time. So this guy goes through stages where sometimes he's darker, other days he's a little bit lighter, but in general, you can kind of see his tonage and his darkness right now, and it's a good representation of the quality that he is. Now, I am using a ring light here, and that does tend to really enhance the undertones, like those gray undertones and some of that little bit yellow undertones, compared to like when I'm looking at him in person, he's not as bright as like looking at him on camera. Same thing with tangerine leopard geckos. When you look at them in person, their color is much more vivid than when you look at them on camera. The white light washes out the color. Well, in this case, the white light washes out the blackness a little bit, if you want to put it that way. So in person, this guy is definitely darker. He is our stud male, but we're gonna see some quality females that he produced this year that are even better than himself. All right, so this girl actually doesn't have a name yet. We bred her last year, pretty young and pretty small. I think she was like 40 grams when we bred her. She was pitch black. She had none of that underneath pattern showing at all. Sometimes that underneath pattern comes out as time goes on, but it's okay, guys. I mean, we're dealing with animals here and projects. It gives us something to look forward to and something to push towards. And it's never a bad thing in an industry that you want to continue on forever strongly to have more that needs to be done. And that's what I'm really pushing for in leopard geckos, is there is so much more that can still be done with leopard geckos. Untapped potential, and we're going to talk about it a little bit today, revolving around these guys and other morphs that can take the same formula. So you can see that ring light really just making a bright white light. No light sensitivity for these guys, you know, unlike albino leopard geckos, which will be closing their eyes all the time. Really nice, really melanistic, really black gecko. So last year, being a younger breeder and being her first year, she actually only produced for us 8 to 10 eggs, but only 1 baby was fertile. She was our darkest breeder going into last year. We have some other breeders that are pretty contenders against her, pretty dark, but she was pitch black, like I said. So let's go get her baby now. So she only mothered 1 baby last year, and this is it. We temperature controlled the baby to try to be a male. Looking at this gecko, I thought it was a little bit young. It's looking like it might be a female, but either way, it's a pretty nice gecko. Like, I really like the darkness and the blackness on this one. Brooke, our volunteer over here at geekygeckocreations, named this one Boba. I forget why. Who knows why Brooke does the things that she does sometimes. But guys, this is a beautiful gecko. It's actually getting darker. When it was a baby, it was a little bit lighter than this, and now it's really getting darker as it gets older. Again, this ring light is really washing out the color, and it's really making, you know, those undertone patterns shine bright. So when you look at this gecko in person, you don't really see that kind of vivid pattern. The light is sort of like penetrating the blackness a little bit and revealing those undertone colors that you don't really pick up with the human eye in person. This little guy or gal, pretty sure it's gonna be a gal because it's old enough to where it should be gender knowable by now. But this little guy or gal is gonna stay here. We kept back every single one of our Black Knight babies this year. I think we had maybe somewhere between 15 to 20 pure babies and then another 15 to 20 crosses. So my goal is just to produce as many Black Knights as we can and as many high quality Black Knights as we can. So let's talk a little bit about the future of the project. Now, because Black Knight leopard geckos have been line bred and inbred, let me explain that real quick. Line breeding doesn't necessarily have to mean inbreeding. For example, you can take a pug dog that has a flat face, and you could take a mastiff dog that has a flat face. You could mix their DNA if what you're going for is flat faces. Both of those dogs come from very diverse, very different sets of DNA and bloodlines, yet it's still considered line breeding because you're taking a dog over here that has the genetics for a flat face, and you're taking a dog over here that has the genetics for a flat face, and you're combining them, even though they come from different families, different lineages, and different lines. Because of their overlapping similar traits, we call that line breeding. Now, line breeding is enhanced to the X degree, like infinite degree, when you inbreed. And inbreeding is proven to be okay for reptiles. It's been proven that in the wild, reticulated pythons, rattlesnakes, and probably even leopard geckos, they all live in caves where they're basically breeding with their mother, their father, their sister, their brother, their cousins for their entire life, passing on those genetics more and more and more. The reason is because those caves are safe, right? It provides safety, it provides food, and so you will oftentimes find populations of reptiles in the wild all within one little nook and cranny, just constantly breeding. And I'm sure there's plenty of other reptile species we could study this in, but it has been studied in rattlesnakes and reticulated pythons for sure. And because leopard geckos are a little tough to study in India and in the Middle East where they're from, I'm sure once we start getting new boots on the ground over there to study their behavior and study different geckos that live together, I'm almost positive you'll find communities of families living together and breeding together in the same caves for convenience, safety, and survival reproductivity. So inbreeding in leopard geckos is okay. Now, what you want to watch out for is when defects start to happen. For example, let's go back to that dog analogy. The mastiff is a completely different bloodline than the pug, let's just say, right? Maybe pugs came from mastiffs because they kind of have similar squarish facial features to me. Regardless, let's say they're two completely different bloodlines and their DNA strands are very far apart. If the mastiff has a tendency or a proneness for diabetes inside of its DNA, which, you know, you could be programmed for diseases inside of your DNA, that's possible. If the mastiff has programming for diabetes inside of its DNA and the pug has programming for diabetes inside of its DNA, then the babies will have even more of a higher chance of having diabetes because dad has diabetes and mom has diabetes, therefore the babies will have diabetes. We see this in human beings as well. Different cultures or different backgrounds that are known to have heightened chances for a certain disease, when they breed or populate within their own population, they're passing on those chances more and more and more, which is why certain cultures, ethnicities, or localities of human beings are known to carry certain diseases or anomalies compared to other populations, which might carry their own diseases and their own anomalies. Getting back to the example in leopard geckos, because Black Knight has been bred to each other for so long within the same family, you're going to get a lot of overlapping features. Some of those features might include smallness, weaker genetics, and weaker genetics can lead to a number of things happening: infertility, short lifespan, or deformities. Now, personally, I've only been breeding Black Knights for 1 year, but I've never seen Black Knights with deformities, such as shark mouth, where the top jaw comes over the bottom jaw, clawfoot, where the feet are born with less than 5 fingers or less than 5 toes. Stubby tail, where the gecko is born with a pear-shaped tail because the genetics are so inbred that sometimes funky shaped tails wind up coming out. That happens in tangerines, by the way. So that's why I call the Black Knight Leopard Gecko the next best morph in America. Because what is the current top morph right now in America? Tangerine. And once tangerine started coming out 20, 30 years ago, people started creating different lines of tangerine, which would have different sets of DNA so that you could produce healthier and healthier animals. Bigger animals, stronger genetic animals, more fertile animals. And I think the same thing is happening right now as we speak with the Black Knight market. It was super rare for Black Knights in the United States 5 to 10 years ago. But now they're becoming more common, more breeders are getting their hands on them, and those breeders are outcrossing the Black Knight into separate bloodlines, and those babies are retaining their darkness, and therefore now it has a brand new set of DNA. Even though it's not as dark as the parents, they're still pretty dark. They have a brand new set of DNA, and it enters in fresh DNA into the pool to breed with. So let's take a look at some of those crosses right now. Now let's start kind of on the lower end of expression, and then we're gonna work our way up higher. So these two leopard geckos are actually 50% Black Knights, meaning that boy earlier that you saw in our video, his name is Toothless, by the way, he was bred to a tangerine leopard gecko that is not Black Knight at all, and here's how the babies popped out. Let's look at baby number 1. You can definitely see the tangerine influence in there. A lot of green, a lot of yellow, a lot of orange, but you could also see some darkness going on. You know, tangerines are not normally this dark, and that's where the father's DNA came in. Now, this gecko can continue getting darker and darker as time goes on, or it might get lighter. Let's take a look at its sibling, its exact sister that was born in the exact clutch at the exact same time, and you'll see just how different genetics can be. This also is a 50% Black Knight. You would almost not even guess that this leopard gecko is 50% Black Knight, but it is. It might get darker as time goes on. It might stay this light. Now the question is, if you take a super dark Black Knight and breed it to this gecko, what is the variation of the babies going to be? That will have to be a future video that I make. But Echo Geckos, you could check him out on Facebook and Instagram at Echo Geckos. He is really well known for breeding Black Knight leopard geckos. And he talks about how a light Black Knight like this, because it still has the coding for darkness inside of its DNA, it still has the potential to produce dark babies when paired back to a Black Knight. But what is the pros and cons of what we're doing here? Pro, you enter in new blood into the Black Knight Project DNA. So now, if the original Black Knight Project that is very heavily inbred has any defects or any problems in it, you are outcrossing those problems to most likely experience them less or not at all when you outcross. It's the exact same thing that is going on with tangerine right now. When you breed two tangerines together, eventually you're going to start to see some defects coming out. When you see those defects coming out, you want to keep that in mind so that you can now outcross that line of tangerine, or at least be ready to outcross, because defects are starting to overlap. Now, I think the Black Knight crosses are a beautiful, beautiful example of leopard gecko. It just has some really unique looking features to it, just a little bit extra hue of melanism. Let's take a look at some other examples that are a little bit stronger 50% crosses than these two. Okay, now this one is pretty cool. This is a 50% cross, but you can see much more darkness going on inside of this gecko. This had a super snow mom. Even as I've been sitting here for a couple minutes, the color on it starts to lighten up a little bit. So sometimes you will experience some temperature changes / mood changes with leopard geckos. You don't really see it too often, but it can, and it does happen. I thought this gecko was going into shed initially when I pulled her, so I was looking for another gecko, and in the 2 minutes that I was looking for another gecko, this gecko just brightened up. That can also be an illusion of darkness. And when you're buying a Black Knight leopard gecko, you want to keep all these things in mind. That temperature can actually make them a little bit brighter or darker. Mood can make them a little bit brighter or darker, apparently. I mean, this is a tough topic to study, but you just saw the change right before your very eyes right now. When I first pulled this gecko, if you rewind the clip, it was a lot darker and a lot more colored in than it is right now. Now, as yellow as this gecko is, actually it has some purple spots spots. I can't remember if this one started off snow when it was younger or not. There's another sibling that I have to this leopard gecko that I'll show you right now. This one for sure I believe to be snow, at least earlier in its life because of how light it was and bright it was. This also is a 50% black knight, and you could see just how much brighter it is compared to the other one. So again, the question is, when I breed a pure 100% really dark black knight to this gecko, what's going to happen to the babies? Now, in theory, if my math is correct, what you'll have is 100% plus 50% divided by 2, and you should get babies that are now 75% black knight. Regardless, if you take 100% male and you breed it to a 50% female, those babies are all going to be higher than 50%, because now the male that was 100% black knight and just pure darkness, he's adding to what that female already is and what that female is passing on to her babies. If I'm wrong on that, correct me below. My brain was a little tired right now and I wanted to really finish this video and show off some cool geckos for you guys. I have a whole wall right here that I call the Black Knight wall, and it's all of the pure black knights that we produced this year. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the best quality ones before we end this video. Okay, this one wasn't on the Black Knight wall, but I saw it and I just had to show you guys. There's actually 2 of them here. These are juvenile black knights. Let me show you the darker one first. So here's the darker one. You can see that melanism really coming through, really shining out, and it's just an awesome, awesome looking baby. Again, even as I get really close to the ring light, it still doesn't really wash out that pattern or color too much. And so that's how you can really tell just how great and dark of a gecko you have. Now its sibling, its clutch mate, also came out pretty dark. I think the first one I showed was a little bit darker. Still really beautiful in her own regard. She is amazing. At least she was temperature controlled to be a she. So far we have 100% success rate. Let me know if we ever don't. If I send you a gecko that was temperature sex for female and it winds up turning out male, let me know. But so far in the last 3 years of breeding, every time I incubated for female, 100% of the time I got female. Now trying to replicate that with male is a little bit more difficult because their temperature zone is a little bit smaller, a little tougher to exactly narrow down. Another pair of siblings here, super, super cool. Let me show you, I think this one's going into shed, but they're both almost pure dark. It's crazy. The darkest ones, they really show a lot of that white flecking, which is like the vitamin powder and stuff that just sticks to their skin, but really cool gecko. And its sibling, which is even darker, super cool. It looks like the Milky Way galaxy or something, the universe, you know, looking onto that back of that gecko. Super pretty. Now either it has a little bit of a tail curl at the end, or it got nipped a little when they were living together as babies. I think it was genetic. I think it was a little bit of a tail curl since birth. And that's what I mean by outcrossing. You know, it's not that big of a deal. It's a little bit of a tail curl. When you inbreed geckos sometimes, father to daughter, son to mother, brother to sister, sometimes you'll get these little overlapping things that happen like that little tail curl. To me, that's not that bad. Now you have an excellent quality gecko that you can now outcross and breed to 50% lines to strengthen that DNA, 75% lines, or completely non-black knight lines to start your own black knight line. Now this one I actually had labeled show. The best of the best is what I always label show. So let's see what we got here. Sometimes things change. This gecko's older than the other ones. And what you really want to look for is how well they carry their color into age, into adulthood. Look at this gecko, it's so beautiful. First of all, let's start with the tail. I just love the black velvety color of the tail is amazing. We go down. See, they calm down as they get older. We go down the pattern of the back. And again, in person, it's gonna be even blacker. This is against the ring light, which really washes out blackness. You can see just how black and amazing that pattern is. What's gonna happen as we continue breeding this gecko to other black knight geckos? Amazing stuff. Oh, here's one more cross I want to show you because I think it's pretty cool. And then I'll show you a couple pure black knight babies, and then we'll probably call the video there. Now, check out this. One of these is snow for sure, and the other one is not. I'll show you both, and you let me know in the comments which one you think is which. Here is a black knight, 50%. This is only 50% black knight. And look how dark this juvenile is. Again, we need to age this girl because just like the bigger ones I showed, you know, they could lose a little bit of that darkness, but this is a good indicator how dark this gecko is for how dark it can be when it's older. Now I'm gonna show you the sibling, and you tell me if you think this gecko, which is number 1, is snow, or if you think number 2 is snow. I'm gonna show you right now. Here's gecko number 2, and I know which one is for sure, so. But you can see a little bit more color in this gecko, a little bit more yellow, but you can see still super, super dark. And hey, who can argue that this is not a super cool looking gecko? I mean, look at that black ink mark on the tail right there. Just the amount of melanin that comes in is awesome. And whenever you bring in more black, those blacks can also turn purple over time. So there's a chance that some of the black will turn purple while other of the black will maintain blackness. But pretty cool. So in the comments right now, which one do you think? Number 1 and number 2. Which one is snow? And I will respond to your comments in the comments below. Now, since our black knights are a little bit of late bloomers or late breeders for us, we just had a black knight born a couple of weeks ago. So I want to show you what a baby black knight looks like. Actually, bonus, there's 2 of them in here. So you guys get the double black knight special. And these 2 are very recently born babies. So this is what baby black knights look like when they first come out. They can be a little bit smaller when they first come out. Most of the time they will have a little bit of pattern showing, and just like I showed on the adults, sometimes you can kind of see that underlaying pattern when they get older, but for the most part, blackness is gonna fill in their pattern as time goes on in some of the best genetic black knights. Here's the sibling to it. Pretty cool, melanistic. Sometimes they almost look like cave geckos to me, because cave geckos, like Japanese cave geckos, have some pretty blackness to them, but pretty good. The reason that I would only recommend baby black knights for experienced breeders is because sometimes baby black knights are a little bit tough to get going. For example, these 2 right now, I only feed and water once a week, but every week when I do, I have to look at them and see, do they look dehydrated? Do they look skinny? Is the skin wrinkling, which could be a sign of dehydration and the fact that they're not eating? Sometimes they refuse to eat out of little bowls like this, so I will take the lid off of the bowl. I'll make sure that I keep a very shallow water dish, but sometimes they don't like to drink out of the water dish, and they thrive better when you spray water on the sides of the plastic. So they require a little bit more attention and care to get going. But you can see how many adult black knights I have. There's no issue at all raising them or breeding them or keeping them, as long as you know and have experience enough to deal with geckos that are a little bit smaller and a little bit more picky. Now, as we outcross the lines, I think that this is going to become less and less of an issue. But since Black Knight is so inbred right now, sometimes a little bit of weaker genetics, a little bit of pickiness, a little bit of smaller size, all of that passes on to the babies, and they struggle a little bit more in the beginning stages of life to get going. So you have to kind of assist them a little bit, which is why I would not recommend them for a beginner, because you could spend $2,000 on a gecko, not know how to assist it, or even assist it, and it might wind up dying on you. Now, out of all the leopard geckos that I have here, a couple geckos die every year from weak genetics, and Black Knight is no exception. So this year, out of maybe 40 total Black Knight leopard gecko babies that we have, let's just say 20 pure and 20 crosses. Out of 40 of those, we only lost 2 Black Knight leopard geckos to weak genetics. But the same thing happens with regular leopard geckos. I have lost a number of regular leopard geckos this year from white and yellow, from Tremper albino, from snow, wild type, other genetics that are outside of Black Knight. But I do want to be upfront and honest with you guys about the difficulty of dealing with Black Knights. In my experience, 100% of the time, you need to be a little bit more alert when those babies are born. You need to be a little bit more on guard to whether they'll drink out of the water dish and whether they'll eat out of the food bowl, or whether you need to remove the food bowl and remove the water dish. Well, I never remove the water dish, but spray water on the back end of the tub, where the warm end, and sprinkle mealworms on the floor. And I don't do this, but if you don't have as many geckos as I do, you might need to check on that gecko every 2 to 3 days to see if it's eating. And you can tell if it's eating because its body will look filled out, muscular, and nice. It's not going to be like shriveled up and wrinkly, which black knight leopard gecko babies can be a little bit shriveled up and wrinkled for the first couple weeks if they're slow eaters, if they're slow at getting started, right? So just things to be aware of. But I think the hobby is trending towards black knight, and in the same way that the hobby trended towards tangerine in the early days, and then many people started outcrossing it and creating different lines of tangerine, I think the same thing's going to happen with black knight. And 20 years from now, we will have some very strong, very solid lines of black knight. Well, guys, I'm back here with Toothless, the father to all of our black knight leopard geckos. The 50%, the best quality, the little bit lower quality, Toothless. He's so cool. He even looks like a Toothless. Like when you look at his face, I don't know, he just kind of looks toothlessy to me. So cute, right? And Toothless kind of has that like more rounded, shorter face a little bit, and this guy kind of does. Now this guy's genetics aren't bad. I mean, he's a pretty good size for a leopard gecko, so he's not really experiencing any of that stuntedness that like you can hear about. But I do have like a couple females here that are a little smaller that could be considered a little bit stunty. But again, that's just line breeding and inbreeding at work. You know, some geckos are going to come out a little bit smaller, some are going to be perfectly fine. You continue to choose the best of the best over the years and accentuate the qualities you're looking for. The problem with black knight up till this point is that everyone has always wanted to choose the darkest of the darkest geckos, even if that meant choosing smaller geckos, which I'm guilty of too here, right? I have 2 small geckos that produce some really, really dark black knight leopard geckos. But what are you going to do? You want to go for blackness first. Once you go for blackness, then you can outcross it to giant and big geckos, whatever you want to do. So at least that's my plan for the black knight project. Now, a couple other things that I did not talk about that I think is going to make the black knight project really unique and continue to strengthen those bloodlines is wild types. Breeding the black knight into Afghanicus, which is already a very dark wild type subspecies of leopard gecko, and Fasciolatus and Turkmenicus, as well as Montanus and any other species or subspecies of leopard gecko that you could find successful pairings with, I think that's going to be great for the black knights moving forward, and also great for tangerine, white and yellow, snow, all of these genetics that we've been breeding within the same macularis pool for so long. We now should start taking those genetics and breeding them into wild types, and you're gonna see some wild stuff happening, because those wild types, they each have a little bit of a different and a unique look to them, and I think it's gonna be super, super cool. So what'd you think about the video, guys? Did you learn a little bit more about black knight leopard geckos today? Did I pique your interest for black knight leopard geckos and make you interested in them if you were not before? Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and I definitely try to respond to all comments that I see. Sometimes YouTube is imperfect, and like I'll see that somebody left a comment on my notifications, but then I'll go to that post and it won't show me, and it won't be in hidden notifications or anything like that. So if that ever happens, guys, feel free to email me at geekygeckocreations@gmail.com, or go to our website and email me there, or hit me up on Facebook or Instagram. I'm always looking at those feeds every single week to see what questions people have for me. So I thank you guys for being here. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And until next time, remember, have a geeky gecko great day.